Hi, and welcome to video 10 in the Gatsby JS series. In this video, all the things we have learned will start falling together as we finish off building and styling up the homepage. This video will primarily consist of creating a couple of new components, using Gatsby to get a few more images in, and styling it all up. So let's look at the design. We already have the hero image, we already have our font awesome icons, so the other components we need are a button component and a recent post component for the blog post at the bottom. You could make the recent posts a fixed part of your homepage rather than being its own component, but it might be nice to pop this on other pages if we feel like it. So a component feels like a better way to go for this. And the reason I'm making button as a component is because we'll use multiple buttons throughout the website. Before we start styling up the page, let's first switch back to VS Code and get it all running with npm start. The first thing we need is the Gatsby and View images. We imported them in the previous video, but if you haven't got them, the link's in the description to download them. And once you've downloaded them, drop them in the Assets Images folder alongside your hero.png image. So let's first set up the components we need. As we mentioned, looking at the design, we're going to build a button component and a recent post component. So let's create them files. So inside our source, components, we want a button.js, and we want a recent posts.js. Oops, not a recent, we want a recent posts.js. Now inside the button, we'll create a default component. So we'll import React from React, export a default function called button, and for now, we'll just return a div that says button. Now we can copy that, place it in our recent posts, and just rename that to recent posts. If we now go back to our home page in index.js, close that query for now, we can make use of these components. So if we look at our design, we have the I am Kieran Venison, we have our icons, and then our about button. So let's just restructure this a little bit. So we want our buttons up at the top, underneath our hello world, and then we want our new button component here. For now, just import that and use it there. It auto added the import for me at the top. And then next we need to make use of our recent posts component. So that's at the bottom of the page. So for now, just underneath this image, we'll get our recent posts. Now if we switch to Chrome, refresh our localhost, we can just check that's all working. So hello world, button and social icons. Wrong order, is social icons and then button. Cut that button and place it underneath the icons. Much better. Then we have our hero image. Then at the bottom of the page, we have our recent posts. Now if we go back to code, let's start styling this up. Now if we just check the design for what we need to do next style-wise, we can get cracking. So on mobile, we're going to stack this directly above the image so it look like that. And then on desktop, we're going to leave it as it is and have a 50-50 split to the left and right. So let's first create that grid. So inside here, we're going to have a div and two divs inside of here. So this is going to be the content that's split to the left, and this is the content that will be split to the right. So we'll give that a class name of, we'll call it hero, seems to make most sense. And then give the first div a class of hero text, and we'll give the second div a class of hero image. The double underscore class names I'm giving here are part of the BEM CSS syntax. If you've not heard of that before, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check it out. It's quite nice for organizing your CSS code. So now I need to copy the H1, the icons and the button, and I need to place all of that inside the hero text area. Just auto close that div for me. ESLint not being handy for a change. Then I can copy my image and place that into the hero image section. So I give that a save. We should have no difference on Chrome if we switch back, but it's just a bit more organized, ready to use. So if I inspect this, you can see here we've got hero, hero text, and our hero image. So let's add some CSS rules onto this. The first one we want to target is hero. Go in here. Just close them icon styles for now. Place these above it. And we want to display grid on mobile. We don't want any columns yet, but we want a little bit of space in between the image and the text. So let's put a grid gap of 1 rem, which works out at 16 pixels because it comes off our base font size. If I go back here, minimize it down to mobile, you can see we have a nice 1 rem gap on that hero, highlighted by the purple lines. So now when we scale this up, let's say a media query for when we get to the minimum width of 768 pixels, we want to split that content. So we'll say grid, template, columns, say 1 fraction and 1 fraction. And you should be getting used to this syntax now. That simply means 1 equal spacing unit of the page, so 50-50. So if we scale that right up to what would be desktop and tablet, you can see we now split the screen. Looking nice. If we have a quick look at our design, hey there, I'm Kieran Renison, Senior Software Engineer, LinkedIn titles and button are all center of this rectangle. Currently, ours are at the top left. So let's fix that spacing. To do that, copy the class hero text and go back to our code and add that rule. What I also want to do here is just wrap this inside another div. And I'll explain why in a second. So if I wrap all of that content inside another div, delete that backslash that I've just accidentally placed in there, we'll add hero text inner. And the reason I'm adding this inner is because we're going to apply some styling rules to this that are grid based, and we don't want it treating our H1 div and button as grid items. We want it to just treat the first div as a grid item. So now we've got the hero text up at the top. Let's also say when you are at tablet and above, so 768, we want you to be display grid. And then we want you to get all your items. So all the items are actually just one item here, that div. So we say align items center and justify content center. And this will just align that one div horizontally and vertically. So we should have it bang in the middle, just like our design. Let's also copy this text out. So I think that text actually might come from our site metadata query. So let's have a look. Oh, no, it doesn't. That's just for the social tags. So for now, let's just copy our text. I'm Kieran Venison. Obviously, write whatever you please in here. And then underneath that, we have Senior Software Engineer. So whilst we're here, let's add that in. And we'll add that in as a P tag. But we'll put the class name to be Hero Subtitle. And that says Senior Software Engineer. So let's just copy that out. Then above it, it says hey there. That's not going to use our class name display because it's a little bit smaller than that font underneath. So that will need a different class name. So let's write class name and we'll call it hero underscore underscore. And what should we name that? Let's try and think of logical class names. So we'll call it prefix actually. So in prefix is the title and the subtitle goes underneath it. And let's spell prefix correctly. Give that a save. Go back to our screen. We're starting to look right now. Obviously the sizing's off and the colours aren't perfect, but that is something we can work on. So let's get that button styled up now. I'm just going to copy the blue from here. And now we want to go to our theme.js, and inside here we have our color object. Let's add our primary color in here. That's a good name for it. So our primary color will be 1758E8, that nice blue we have on the homepage button. And now let's style up our button component. So if we go back to button here, what does the button say on it? It says about. So for now we'll write about. Actually no, let's do it properly. Here we'll get the children. Switch this to be a button tag. Pass the children into it. We'll also want an on-click handler to handle what the button actually does. So we have a button with its on-click and the children being passed in. The error here is from ESLint and it's giving me some accessibility problems. So buttons should have a type. They can be submit and button. So this one is not a submit, it's just a normal button. And there we have it. Now let's import styled from style components. And then we can create our button style. So const button styles equals styled dot button. And we'll copy that and replace our button tag with that. So let's throw some default styles in here. For now, we'll have an outline of none. We'll get rid of the border and we're going to set the background. And the background is going to be set to our theme, destructured. And it's our theme dot colors. Let's have a look in our theme.js. Theme, not color, sorry. Theme dot color dot primary. So theme dot color dot primary. Next, we want to set the text color. So if we get the color, and that is a pure white. So let's have, we'll set that to our background color actually, as we've already got that in there. So do theme.color.background, close that off. Then we've got some padding here. So how wide is that? See, we have some space in here. So I can't tell at a glance, but I think it's about half a rem to the top and about 3 rem to the left and right. So let's just try that out and see how it looks. So 0.5 rem top and bottom, 3 rem left and right. 3 rem seems a bit too much, let's go 2. Then we have a border radius, we can get that straight from the designs. So the border radius is 3 pixels. Border radius, 3 pixels. And that is a very light font size, so I'm thinking that's Montserrat regular. So I think that's what it already is. So let's save that. Go back to the page and there's no text. Oh, I know why, because we're passing in the children to button, but we haven't supplied any children in our home page. If we go back to the button in our home page and supply about, for now we'll just set the on click to equal console.log button hit, just so we're passing through both of them props. Now if we check the design again, we have our about button. This needs to be on its own line. So inside our index.js, just throw that into another div for now whilst we're playing about, so it'll break it down onto a new line. Lovely. We're not a million miles away. We need a bit more spacing at the top of this, but we can do that in the homepage styling. For now, that'll do as our button style. So let's get the grey for this text. That grey is 9B, 9B, 9B. So we'll copy that, go back to our theme.js, and we'll add a color text offset. The reason I'm not adding things in such as color grey is because these can change, and we might pass in a red as a text offset in the future, and then the name in grey would make no sense at all. Therefore, it's good to try and think of names that don't specifically mention a color in them. So now if we go to our index.js, we can get the class name for our hero prefix. And I think our hero subtitle will also be the same color. So let's go dot hero subtitle. We'll set the color of both of them to be the theme dot color dot text offset, I think. Lovely, now they've both got that nice grey. It looks like we've kind of got the spacing right on the hey there. The weight's a little bit too chunky on these though, so let's just bring that down. So we'll say font weight, let's go 300. Nice, that's looking a bit skinnier. You've got to remember we're not actually using Montserrat for most of the fonts, we're using Open Sans because we imported 2 fonts, so it will look slightly a bit different from the design. And then the About page as well, let's also thin that up while we're here. And make it a bit wider, I think it did need 3 rem of padding. 3 rem, we'll say font weight, 300. Refresh. Oh, 3 rem's just too big. Let's go for 2.5. Normally you'd have an exact specification if this was from a designer, but as this is just a design I've made, we can just do what feels right at the time. So now we need to get the spacing on the bottom piece of text and the margins correct for this component. So I actually quite like the spacing at the top and bottom. Actually, it looks a little bit big, so let's just pull a bit of spacing off this H1. So the H1's margin is currently adding 21 pixels to the top and bottom, so let's change that. On our home pages, let's actually add a class to that. We'll call it hero title, because I quite like the H1 style for our normal pages, but as this is one that stands out more than most, we'll tag it separately. So the hero title will have the margin 1 rem, the top and bottom, 0 to the left and right. Let's check if that looks nice. Still a little bit too big. Let's see if our rule's working on it. Yep, there it is. Let's play about with it in these settings. That's not actually changing it. Why is that? I think that's because our prefixes also have the padding, so yes. Let's add margin 0 to them. And then we should be able to now target our H1 with that style, and we'll move it down to 0.5, I think. Yeah, 0.5 looks nice. So our hero, put to 0.5 rem. This is all winging it in terms of design, so feel free to do whatever feels right for yourself. Now we need to space between the icons. So we've already got a real target in them. Let's add a margin. I think it's a bit on top, but more on bottom. So let's add 2.5 rem to the top. And to the bottom, we'll add 3.5 rem. And why have we all of a sudden got left and right margin? Ah, I didn't put margin top. Nice, I actually think that's worked perfectly first time. Nice, I actually think we can take a little bit off that bottom one, it seems a bit far away, so let's go for 2, and we'll go for 2.5. Nice, looking miles better now. Last thing is, we seem a little bit more squashed up here. There's much more space at the top and bottom on the design than there is in ours. So let's add a bit more space onto the top of that. I think we'll actually just set a height on this. So the height of this is 653. Height on ours is 339. Yes, we're nearly half the size. So let's manually add a bit more height onto that. So we'll say from tablet and above, set the height. We'll set the height not to be 650, but around 500, and we'll see how we're looking. Nice. That's right, but the image has not changed at all. So let's stretch that image out to fit. as we're using Gatsby image for this, how do we target the actual image? And the answer is Gatsby imports the image and it adds the Gatsby image wrapper class on. So we can target that. So inside our hero image, we'll target hero image.Gatsby image wrapper. So let's find our hero image. We haven't added a rule for that yet. Hero image, and we'll target .Gatsby image wrapper. And we only want to stretch this out once we're above that. So on mobile, we want the width to be 100%, and above 768 pixels, we want the width. We also want the height to be 100%. Go back, refresh. Still not quite working. Let's have a look. So I spelled height incorrectly. Lovely. And as it's using the Gatsby image wrapper component, it all automatically uses the contain feature, so the image won't distort as you stretch it up. It'll just move the location of the image. So on mobile, nice spacing. I think we need to add a bit of padding around this component on mobile. It looks a little bit odd. So on mobile, let's say our hero text has padding of 3 rem, 3 at the top and bottom, and 0 to the left and right. That spaces it out a bit nicer. And then let's see what it looks like with all the text aligned to the center. Much nicer. So let's copy that rule out. Go back to our design. And inside our design, we will set the hero section to have that padding and text align center. And then when we go to desktop, we want padding to be back down to 0 and our text align to be back to left. So let's have a look at that. That looks much nicer on mobile now. And then we'll go up to tablet and desktop. And the aligning is not working. So let's have a look why. It's still using my rule. I need to refresh. Refresh the page. Lovely. We are now aligned to the left. So that's looking quite a lot like our design now. Let's build the next component. This component is much simpler, but we'll need to source these 2 images. So if we go back to our code, go to our home page, scroll down to our recent posts. Let's go into that component actually. So recent posts, that looks like it's a H2. Save that. Yeah, that looks about right. Put a space in between there. This is inside a container, so we need to start applying style rules. So we'll import styled from styled components, and then we want to create a style rule and not call that form. Recent post styles equals styled dot div. This should be becoming second nature by now. Whenever we want to apply styles, we create a style component and we replace the tag we want to style with it. So we have an error down here. Don't know how long that has been going on for. Styled components. It's a new error. And then we want to say, let's set the width for that to 100%. So it looks like we're having a bit of issue on the home page. So what's happening here? Oh, it is. So when I was on desktop before, it looks like the image is going above it. We can check that by just setting the text align to center. It is going above it. Why is that? Peculiar. Put this on the bottom. There we go. We can now inspect it and see what's going on. So is that because of any margins or spacing? What I think we need to do is set the overflow hidden on our hero component. So inside our home page, pop them styles open, set the overflow to hidden on this. There we go. Now our image is just cut off nicely at the bottom. So the recent post has quite a chunk of space in between here. So if we go back to our recent post component, the first thing we can do is put a padding top. Oh, we'll go for margin top actually. And we'll say free rem on mobile. Might not be enough on desktop. It definitely needs to be more on desktop. So free rem will be good for mobile. We'll say and media. Min width is 768 pixels. Margin top, I think we'll go for double what we just went for, so we'll have 6. Yep, much nicer. If we go back to our home page, we can get the images as well. So if we go down to the bottom here, we can copy this hero image, paste that in, and in here we want to get our files. So assets, images, hero and not hero, sorry, Gatsby and view. So if we write Gatsby, Gatsby.png, we'll call that Gatsby image. And then for our second image, we'll call it view image. And we'll get view.png. We also don't need them to be this big, as it's not spanning half the width of the entire page. It's in a container. So we'll just say about 600 pixels wide for the max width. Now to our recent post component, we'll pass an articles object. And what do we have? We just have the titles. So for naming's sake, let's call this posts. And that can be an array. And the first one will have the title of creating a Gatsby JS website from scratch. Eventually we'll be getting these from Contentful, but for now we can just place them here. And the image will be data dot, I can't remember this one, so let's destructure them in first because we forgot that. Gatsby image, view image. And we'll copy the existing one we did for the hero component just because it's a lot of effort to write out every time. So for each of the images, we'll pass in Gatsby image, .child image start, .child image sharp, .fluid. And we'll copy this object and we'll rename that to view image. And the title of that one is taking our first steps into Vue.js. Lovely. If we now go back to our recent post component, we can import the image from Gatsby image. Then inside the actual component, we want to create a div with the class name posts. And then we can map through the recent posts we provided. So we need to destructure posts off this. Check I named it post in the end. Yes, I did. And that's an array. So we can do posts, silly typos, we can do posts.map, and that will return an individual post. And inside here, we want to return a div, which will be the individual post. We'll set the key to be the post.title. As I imagine all the titles of our articles will be unique. And then we need to render the image. And if you remember from the previous video, we need to specify whether it's fixed or fluid. We are using a fluid image, as when it gets down to mobile, the size will shift. And then we want to put the post.image inside here. You can add alt tags on here, like you can with normal images. So we could set the alt tag to be post.title, just for accessibility. And then inside each of these, we also need to display the post.title to the user. Now let's add some class names on here. Actually, we only need the one class name, and the class name will just be post. That's all it needs to be. If we refresh that, if we save that, go back to our home page, refresh, can see our insanely large images are here, and they're looking a little bit blurry, but they're obviously looking blurry because we're rendering on the entire width of the page, which is huge, and we said we were only going to use them at about 600 pixels. So let's create a little grid inside of here. So if we copy that, so if we cut that, create a div and just paste it back in, set the class name of that grid to be container. And we're probably going to use containers in multiple places on this website. So you could make this a React component called container, but instead I am just going to add it to our global styles in theme. So inside here, say dot container, and then we'll set the padding to be 1, nothing at the top and bottom, and 1 rem at the left and right, so that when we get down to mobile, we've got a little bit of gutter to the left and right. And then when we get to 768 pixels, we'll set the max width to be 80%. Let's try that. Not the max width, sorry, the width to be 80%. We'll set the margin to 0 auto just to center that. So if we put that back up to the right, I'm not a massive fan of it being down at the bottom. That doesn't appear to be working. So margin 0 auto, width 80%. Is it because I don't have the display type on? No, let's inspect this and see what's going wrong. Container. Doesn't appear to be getting our rule. Min width, that's why. Min width, 768. Now I can remove that display block as well. I actually think we could squeeze that in a little bit more, so let's say 65%. Right, that's looking nice. Now we need to put these to the left and right, like the design. So on mobile, I think we'll leave them as they are and just stack them. But on desktop, we definitely want them to be split. So in here, I'm going to create another class. I'm going to call it post grid. Actually, I'm not going to create another class. That's a bit of excessive nesting going on right there. We don't actually need it. So we have this class name post already, so we can make use of that. And then here we can say, when you get 768 pixels, display grid, and grid template the columns to half the page each. Put a gap of 2 rem between them. Min width 768 pixels, display grid, grid 10 pp, template columns. Still not working. Spot the mistake. Where is it? It just needed to refresh. They are looking way too small. The design is much bigger, so I think my guesstimation spacing may be a little bit off. So let's go back in here and we'll change that container. We'll set it back to 80%. That's looking much better now. And we need to thin that font out and add a bit of spacing underneath recent posts. I think recent posts also needed to be a bit larger. So inside our theme.js, we'll add our global rule into all H2s. Just check what size it is now. Currently it is a 1.5 rem. So we'll go for font size 1.75 rem and see how that looks. Yep, that's better. The spacing at the bottom is actually quite nice. So now let's change these titles. So inside our recent posts, we can tag it our post P and then say font width Font weight, for that 300, so it's nice and thin. Looking nice. And now in our tire recent post block, let's add a free rem margin bottom so the footer's not squashed up against it. Much better. There's an issue. When we go to a really wide screen size, 80% is just too wide. So let's limit that. So inside our theme JS on our container, we'll set another rule. And we'll set a font rule for 992 pixels. And that tends to be older, smaller res laptops and few desktops. But it's a good place to add this rule in. So here we'll set max width of, we'll go for 960. Not max width, sorry. We'll set a width of 960 pixels. We'll set the margin to be 0 auto. And now, on that size, everything will be locked between our grid. Now we have our homepage styled up. Join me in the next video, where we'll style up some more pages of our application, ready for hooking up our blog. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the course, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.